Welcome to the Zest Podcast, the podcast that flips the script on traditional coaching. Here, we challenge the status quo by turning coaching relationships on their heads. Instead of the usual dynamic where coaches lead the way, we give the coachee the mic. Each episode, a coachee interviews their coach, diving into topics they're both passionate about, be it leadership, personal growth, or navigating challenges such as neurodiversity in the workplace. Our unique format inspires authentic conversations, shared learning, and fresh perspectives. We are showcasing the dynamic chemistry that comes from real-world coaching relationships. The mission is to disrupt power dynamics, spark curiosity, and offer you inspiring, zesty insights into work, life, and everything in between. So join us as we explore bold ideas, unfiltered stories, and the transformative power of coaching, zesty style.
Hi, my name is Daniel Fulvio. I am Director of Community Partnerships at Rombear, the UK's contemporary dance company. It's such a pleasure to be part of the podcast series, and it's my absolute pleasure and privilege to introduce Taslim Tharani, who is my former coach, and just really looking forward to having a chat with you, Taz.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited about it. And yeah, when Zest Psychology kind of suggested this idea about having a podcast with our coaching clients, I was like, you were the one that I was like, yes, I would love to have this conversation with you. So yeah, thank you so much as well for being up for this.
I'm really excited. I think it'll just be like a really fun chat, and it's sort of like animates just loads of stuff that we've always sort of been interested in about, or particularly like what I'm interested in about, in terms of like what it means to bring your whole self to work. What is sort of authenticity in the workspace? Is the personal political, and how does that show up at work? And just kind of like what our relationship was, as well as we kind of went on a really sort of transformative journey for me in our coaching sessions. So I guess I talked about this just a few seconds ago. Like, what does it mean to like bring your whole self to work? And is it ever a tricky thing to do? How does that sort of work for you, basically?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. And I think, and there's part of me that sometimes cringes with the phrase now about like bringing our whole self to work, because it feels like it's become a little bit of a, what's the phrase? Like not jumping on the bandwagon, but it's become one of those phrases that a lot of people use without really, I think, understanding what we need from our organizations, from culture, from leadership, and also from ourselves, to be able to bring more of ourselves like into the workplace. And I think that there are actually some real risks for some people about bringing more of themselves in, or their whole self in, if the context isn't quite ready for that, or if sometimes like bringing our vulnerabilities could set us up for discrimination or harassment or bullying or whatever that might be. So I think there is a bit of a discernment about bringing our whole selves to work. And I think, I've often facilitated workshops actually about authenticity being a privilege, that actually some people can have, some people with certain demographics or certain levels of power within an organization almost have more permission to bring more of themselves into work, and also who they are in and of itself isn't perceived as a threat. And I think for many of us who have protected characteristics, especially, sometimes even being who we are visibly can make other people feel really uncomfortable. And it's like, how ready are we, the organization, to confront some of those things? And this is actually something that I end up talking a lot about with clients of mine. How much, so many people I think come to work and they leave, it's like they're carrying themselves with a backpack. They leave their backpack at the door when they kind of go into work, and they're kind of a different person at work, and they've kind of created this kind of work, like this is who I am at work and this is who I am at home. And some of the work that I do with coaching clients is how do we integrate that? Well, is it something that you want to do? So is it something, do you want to bring more of yourself at work? Like what would bringing more of who you are help you to do at work? Like, would it help you build more trusting relationships? Would it help ease some of the anxiety or some of that kind of tension that we might have if we're constantly kind of shifting and shape shifting to kind of meet the requirements or the perceived kind of requirements of who we are meant to be at work? And so we talk about, how do we integrate these things, or like, these are the parts of myself that I would like to bring more into work. I just don't know how to go about doing it. And I think the other thing about bringing our whole self to work is, who is that? Like, I know that you and I have talked about this before, but like we're all different in different contexts, right? The way that I am in my coaching sessions as a coach isn't how I am when I'm, playing with my friends' children, right? We all behave differently in different contexts. And I think sometimes authenticity can be exploited or overplayed, right? So then we think, well, I'm just being authentic. And that can actually be an excuse for harm or an excuse for really inappropriate behavior. And so I think about this much more in terms of attunement or alignment. So yes, my behavior might be different in different contexts, or in this context, I might want to bring more of this part of me in. And in that context, I might want to bring more of this part of me in, or in this context, like my playfulness and my fun, can really come out. And in this context, I think I need to bring more of this kind of seriousness into that context. And I think that all of those things are us being authentic. And I think there's something about an attunement or an alignment between ourselves, our bodies, our thoughts, the context, the situation. And I think that's when we feel like we're being authentic. And that's when other people perceive us to be authentic, even if we are leaving some of who we are behind. Does that make sense?
I love that. I love that so much. It's so funny, alignment. I've just started doing a bit of Pilates at the moment, and the reformer, and this word has cropped up a lot, and it's been making me think about it, but also just in terms of like my personhood and what it means to feel aligned. And I absolutely agree with you, because I don't think there is like an essential self. I don't think like, if I peeled away mask after mask after mask, there's like an essential Daniel somewhere. I feel like there's lots of different versions of myself, and that doesn't mean that I'm inauthentic. I just really powerfully, I think that's why one of the reasons I'm so drawn to sort of theatre and performance, because it's, like as Shakespeare said, as Hamlet said, all the world is a stage and everyone must play their part, and I feel there's a real power in that. And I feel like trying to reach for authenticity is a little bit of a trap, but I totally think it's brilliant, your point about like being aligned, and that might be different sort of bits that you integrate according to that situation. The other thing you said, which really struck me, was about bringing your whole self and how dangerous that could be in some contexts. It really reminds me, we're doing some work at Rombe with this amazing cultural thinker, Suzanne Hélène, and she's often cited that, if you're in a position of sort of distinct power in an organization, you might be around a table and someone might raise a question that's quite a kind of interesting to you question, or kind of quite confronting, and that's that might be viewed as kind of like a novelty or something that's kind of quite enlivening, or like, oh wow, I never thought about it like that. But Suzanne's point is that quite often might cost that person that job to make that point, like the amount of bravery and courage that it takes to sort of make that point. And it just made me sort of think about that as well, like how it could just be quite a tricky place to sort of be authentically yourself, and you're kind of negotiating complex power dynamics and even perhaps like your kind of vulnerability in an actual job. So I just feel like it's lots of what you said absolutely like resonates with stuff that I've been thinking about recently.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful example what you've just shared, because You're absolutely right. And I think especially in the context, like I know that you and I are both do kind of some activism work. And also as you know, I work in the diversity, equity, inclusion and justice space. And I think that's something that we don't really talk a lot about is when we name things that might be challenging or might be a bit dissenting or confronting for some people, we do lose some of our social capital, or we can if the context isn't ready to hear that. And I think that example that you've just shared is exactly why this discernment is so helpful. But I guess I also want to name that the burden of that discernment sits often with the individual, and it often sits with the individual with the least amount of power in the room. So the impact of this is quite significant on that person who's maybe holding a lot of this tension or holding all these things that would be helpful to name if the context was ready to hear it. But actually the risk to them is so high, both on an emotional level, but like you said, on a real practical level in terms of like, could this lead to them like no longer being able to retain their job? And that could be because they're like pushed out, or it could just be because then they're targeted because of what they've named.
Yeah. This is such a good chat. It's really, really good to connect with you. I just wanted to just articulate that. I was feeling a little bit of nerves, but they're kind of evaporating now. So, Can we talk a bit about playfulness?
Yeah. Say more about playfulness.
I mean, do you use playfulness in your, like, does it show up for you in the spaces you hold? Just like, how does sort of joy and playfulness show up for you in your professional context, in activism, just in anything? So I just think it's so important to me to sort of, that is just always, it's just very important to me, basically.
It's such a great question, and actually it's something that I struggle sometimes to bring. So I think that's something that I absolutely loved about our coaching, because I remember you came into our first conversation and there was just this lovely energy. There was just this like, hi. And I like your energy actually like really shifted my energy as well in terms of that coaching relationship. And so I loved like how we together were able to move between like the serious stuff, the playfulness, the fun, the kind of joking. And I would say that that's probably part of, I think, the way that I've worked up to this point is probably because a lot of my work is in coaching and a lot of my work is in like leadership development training or well-being at work, or the diversity, equity, inclusion space, which I think that kind of playfulness and fun and the joy is probably more important in that in the more serious or the more challenging a topic is, almost the more playfulness can add a lot of value. But there's something about kind of how we hold it, and I'm definitely not I don't see myself as having like wit, or like I don't like, people laugh at me a lot, but I'm not like, I don't naturally have like, I can't give you like a one-liner. And I think one of the ways that I do this is both in terms of like the activities that we do, like in workshops or in training, that there's like a playfulness or a creativity around them, but also working with colleagues who can also bring some of that wit as well. Like you can bring some of that so that we can kind of really bounce off each other, because I realize that I sometimes need somebody else to kind of bounce off of. And then there's something around, I think this links with authenticity, in terms of like in my life outside of work, I think most of my friends would see me as bubbly, as playful, as fun, as creative. And I find those parts of myself actually quite challenging sometimes to bring into a work context. I had a point to this and I've lost it. Anyway, I can't remember what I was going to say. Whatever I was going to say, I'm sure was going to be epic. But yeah, I can't remember. Oh yes, I remember. Yay. Yes. So I remember this was also with Zest Psychology, but I I guess, hosting a in-person panel discussion with them in June, and I brought this like this caftan top with like lots of like shiny things on it, and I think like what we wear can kind of really bring that playfulness in, like colours. And you'll notice that I'm almost always in quite plain colours, but actually I love sparkles and colour, and I think that that's kind of another way to bring playfulness in. And we started the panel, and I was like, I paused like in the middle of me hosting this panel conversation. I was like, I realised that I haven't changed my top. And I really wanted to like wear something different this evening. And everyone was like, Pals, go change. It's like in the middle of hosting this like kind of discussion, I go off and I get literally, there was some stairs. I actually went down the stairs so I wasn't visible, but I could still hear, because I'd asked a panel member a question. So it's like, I started to hear what they said.
That is amazing.
So I like playful in that way.
I
but
love
I know
that.
a lot of psychologists like actively bring play into their work. Like people use like improv, or I know some other colleagues at Zest Psychology are bringing psychodrama into like leadership and into workplaces. There's Lego play, which I think is quite big. So there's lots of different ways now that a lot of organisational psychologists and consultants are bringing play into leadership and into the work that they do. But obviously this is such a big part of the work that you do. So I'd love to also hear more about how playfulness and joy shows up for you.
I like my friend Ben Walters, super smart. He did a PhD on Ducky, which is this like queer arts institution, and it was all about queer fun and just how, and I guess that's like influenced a lot of the way that I think. Maybe it's just because I was already predisposed to that anyway, but I feel like it's really important to take fun seriously. I think particularly as a queer person and in queer spaces, you can really see why that is so. It's like fun is as like whether that's in a kind of community space that I've set up. Like the same friend does brilliant kind of collage-esque badge making, and I've sort of run some of that activities with participants at Rambert, or whether it's in a queer club and just sort of dancing and having fun, or any kind of space where you can have fun. It's really important because I think it allows. It's kind of an arena where kind of radical ideas can be exchanged, other ways of being can be expressed, and I think that's really important. And I think those spaces should be cherished. It's more so now than ever. So I feel like that like animates a lot of the work that I do, and I feel like if I like just like kind of my work at Rhombus is sort of develop programs of activity and kind of like really expand access of dance to as many people as possible, many people who might not have considered dance, or even particularly contemporary dance, as a thing that they can access, whether it's in themselves or by watching it. But if you kind of and before that I worked at a theatre doing community engagement, and it was the same principle but with theatre. But if you just boiled it down, what I do, it's about bringing people together into spaces to enjoy themselves. That is essentially what I do. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of, there's all these philosophical underpinnings, and there's budgets, and there's complex partnerships, and there's all this stuff that goes into it. But essentially, that is what I do, and it's just what I love doing, and it's about hopefully empowering all the people who run that space, the people that the participants within it, the artists who are kind of living sessions, to all have that sense of fun. You know what I mean? Like when we were training, at Christmas we trained. Got this big project. Hopefully, I'm able to talk a bit more about it through the course of the chat. But big project, training nursery practitioners in Greater Manchester across all the 10 boroughs to deliver movement workshops for the children in their nurseries. A lot of nerves, lot of anxiousness as we brought these people together in this space. And I remember kind of showing up for the session, and it was a big project, and I had a bit of nerves as well. I thought, I just have to enjoy this and have some fun, because like if the person running the project doesn't imbue that, it's going to be passed on to the participants, and ultimately their task is to go to nurseries and to kind of just allow and encourage the preschoolers to have joy in movement. And it's as simple as that. You know what I mean? If you can just have a sense of joy in everything you do as much as possible, then that's really important and radical, and would quite often lead to the success of a project, I think.
And as you've just been speaking, what I've been thinking about is how playfulness and joy and movement is so connecting. And it's so connecting at so many different levels, isn't it? Like, it helps us to connect to ourselves and like release some of these like inhibitions, or like we have to do things in a certain way. Like it's really liberatory, isn't it? Like, movement can be so liberatory. So it allows us to like drop into ourselves and in some ways not even think about like what we're doing. We're just in the moment. But it also really deepens connections between us as well. And as you were speaking, it reminded me of when I facilitate mindfulness and meditation groups, we bring a lot of playfulness into those spaces. And I remember going on with my sister's been encouraging me for years to go on a meditation retreat in Scotland called Darnacoa. The place is Darnacoa. It's absolutely stunning. It's by this beautiful loch, and you're surrounded by mountains. It's the most beautiful place. And we went to a breath body movement. I think it was called Breath Body Earth or something like that, the retreat. And one of the facilitators, she was they were both incredible, but she brought so much play to the movement. So she was almost like teaching people how to move and how to move playfully, so that we could do the kind of a bit more like movement and like expressing ourselves through movement in the afternoon sessions. And I remember once we like went for a walk, she took the whole group of us out for a walk, and like was inviting us to like walk differently. And then we were also like copying each other's walks, and I don't know, like we were all being really silly, but we laughed so much. And I was really just aware of how that laughter, but together with other people and being almost like children do, like walking like linked arms, and you're doing like one leg going the other way. Do you know what I mean? Like just really silly things, but just how joyful, connecting, releasing, liberating it was. And I do actually think that kind of brings us full circle back to authenticity, because actually it allowed more of us to bring like just more of an embodied sense of who we were into that space. And it was really fun. So that's one thing that came up. And then there's one more thing, but I'll give you some space to respond if you want to before I jump.
I love that. I love that. That's the kind of movement I'm interested in. Like we like, and that's kind of what I've tried to sort of develop at Romba, is like not teaching. There is a space to kind of teaching steps in choreo and sequence. That is really important. But I think it's way more important, and there's way more science behind the benefit of like encouraging the conditions where people can create their own improvisatory movement that comes from themselves. So absolutely love all of that. Love.
I think you would love this practice that I learned on this retreat called authentic movement. So I can't remember the original person who developed this practice, but the person that we learned it from is Padma Darshini, probably pronouncing her name wrong. But anyway, I'll send you a bit of information afterwards. But it's such a beautiful practice, because essentially it's exactly what you've just shared. It's about it's a very meditative type of experience, and you would have like essentially a group of people, and you would have some people being movers and some people being witnesses, and the movers would essentially take the floor and they would move, and the movement would come, like you say, from that really embodied place, and there's no kind of right way of moving. It's just whatever needs to be expressed in that moment. And there's also sometimes experimentation with touch. So people are moving with their eyes closed. And so in a space, you might end up coming across another body, and you're not going to know who that body is. And then there's something about, sensing, does this person want to experiment with, connection, or do they not want to? And then after a period of time, the witnesses, the people who've moved will say, I would really like to be witnessed in this moment of my movement. And then the witnesses will then share what they noticed and what they saw and what they experienced. And again, it is such a profound connecting experience, and to be witnessed in our movement. So yes, there's something about our body, like allowing our bodies to move, and experiencing that kind of freedom and liberation, but also what can emerge like through that movement and through maybe connection with somebody else, because you don't know who you're connecting with. And sometimes that connection can be really playful, but sometimes it might be that they're sensing emotion in the other person and they just put their hand on them. And it's all happening with eyes closed. You don't know who it is, and you might suddenly feel that real love and care from someone, and it could open up some emotion. So it's another way of exploring, experiencing, and processing things that we find really hard to process through words. So it's such a beautiful and powerful practice. I'm going back on the retreat again in March next year. I've just booked it. It was just amazing. So yeah, authentic movement is the practice. And yeah, I think you would love it, and I think it would be amazing to be able to bring that to young people as well.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. Please send me the info on that. That sounds amazing. That sounds absolutely amazing. Oh.
Yeah. I'm loving this conversation.
Me too. Me too. Should we? So one of the things that we were chatting about when preparing for it is about like impact and how we know if something's working, and how you measure that and what are the challenges about that. Like, should we chat a little bit about that? How does that sound? Like, I mean, I guess how do we know when something's working? Like, what are the challenges sort of measuring the success of something or the impact of it?
Yeah. I'm probably going to speak about this from a coaching perspective, because there's so much that I could say about measuring impact, like doing a theory of change and, all that kind of stuff. But I actually want to, and how we like formally evaluate, or, if we evaluate in terms of like randomized controlled trial, there's all these kind of scientific ways of measuring impact. But I actually think that I think one of the things that I'm really curious about is, how do we sense impact in the moment? Mm-hmm. Like, is there an attunement between, like, for example, I think in coaching, like, is there an attunement between me and the client that I'm able to kind of sense impact in the moment? Or actually, if I'm enjoying the session, whether or not the session is impactful, do I then think that, this is really impactful because there's kind of an enjoyment of the session? Whereas actually that session might be less impactful than the ones that are really like emotive, or the ones that are where it's a really kind of sometimes it's those sessions where I think I don't know if the client's going to come back. Like, I think this was such a hard session, I don't know if the client is going to come back, and then the client comes back and they're like, that session was really hard, but my goodness, it was a turning point. Like, it's those kinds of, so it didn't feel good for me or necessarily, or for the client, but it helped something shift. So I think there's something around, I know I'm not directly answering your question. And then the other thing that I think I find really challenging as well is that sometimes the shifts are so intangible. Like, it's really hard to put words to the impact as well. Like, so especially, like, I'm working with this actually at the moment with my coaching supervisor, because I'm trying to figure out like how to articulate firstly what I do in coaching, because I don't really know, I don't have the words to describe it, and then also like what the impact is, especially when that impact is tangible. So some coaching clients have really tangible outcomes, like I don't know, they change careers, or they get a promotion, or they just feel a lot more confident in themselves, and it's tangible in the sense that other people can kind of see the shift that they're having, that's happening. Like they might be standing or just showing that just their energy shifts, you know. But other things are kind of a lot deeper and might not be visible. And I think it's really hard to name that for the coach and the coachee. And so then how do you measure something that is just a really intangible shift? So these are all kind of questions that I have, and I can't say that I figured it out yet. I'm still kind of exploring what that looks like. And I think the other thing that feels really important to me as a coach is to have check-ins with my clients, which I don't always do. It depends on the clients, but to see like, is this working, or do we need to do things differently? Like, I think at the end of most of my sessions, I often say like, what worked well? Is there anything you want us to change for next time? Because if something isn't working, then we can change things. We can find new ways of doing things. We can bring different energies to the space. We can bring like different ways of like exploring things. So yeah, I think kind of feedback as continuous is probably an important thing, like rather than a kind of measuring impact at the end of something. But you know, how do we do this like iterative approach where there's space to kind of check in with that impact and kind of feel that impact as well in an embodied way. But I'd be really interested, just to hear your response, but also in your work as well, what this looks like and feels like.
Yeah, I just remember that we always used to do a check-in at the end of our sessions, and that was always really helpful, about what worked, what didn't work. I remember that was like something that we always would do. It's so interesting. There's so many parallels with my work. Like it's there's the two big projects or programs of work is like, one is with with preschoolers, and it's about improving school readiness by embedding dance into nurseries, and there's two aims. One is to sort of improve the school readiness, to sort of the physicality of children for when they start school, and the other is to improve the sort of well-being and confidence of the practitioners, the nursery workers who are sort of delivering that work. And we just everything to your point, like we're sort of tracking the sort of well-being of the practitioners, and then we're looking at the children's development through sort of qualitative methods of like by the way the practitioners observe their improved numeracy and literacy and all these things that are happening through doing the movement workshops. There's lots of really interesting sort of surprising findings that are already emerging, but it's really complex because I guess the long-term societal change that we hope to enact through the project, which is improving school readiness and then the life chances of those children as a result of taking part in that project, there's sort of changes that we might, if the project runs to the most successful way that it can be, those outcomes we won't see for maybe another 10, 15 years. And similarly with our sort of big youth engagement program that works with young people, and it's about it's not a dance or a drama program, it's just about young people meet all these different really inspiring people from different areas of creative industries. They've met screenwriters and makeup artists, all different people, and they've kind of developed skills, and we're sort of tracking their self-efficacy, and we're using an accredited scale to do that, and we can kind of look at these really important shifts, but the long-term aim of that project is to make the cultural sector more equitable, and it's just those sorts of shifts would take many, many years to kind of really be able to discern with the actual young people we've worked with. So I guess it's a sort of it's sort of regular measuring of it, and then also with the kind of aim for those sorts of long-term things. But it's so complex because a young person might have intersected with lots of different influences to kind of for that change that positive change to have taken place. So it's a complex thing. I think I think a helpful thing about like impact, like measuring impact on projects though, is at like a really fundamental level, it's kind of you're able to tell how you could do things better for like next year for the project
Yeah.
by speaking to the young people, by speaking to the practitioners, and kind of working out just how the project can be better. So I feel like if I kind of like boil it down to its most essential part, like that's always just really, really useful to kind of be able to kind of improve the project each from year to year. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think there's a few things in what you've just shared that, like you say, is really challenging. So how do we measure long-term impact? And how do we kind of account for all the other variables that could be influencing that outcome? And the way that they do it in science is they do what they call randomized controlled trials, where you always need a control group.
Yes.
But then in your context, what's the ethics of like having a control group? If this is a longer term piece,
Yes.
like how do you create this? And
Yes.
and also then needing quite huge data sets that you can kind of follow for 15, 20 plus years, because you're always going to have people dropping out, and having ways where you can track that doing this thing causes this thing. And that's the bit that's really difficult, like you say, because there are all of these other variables, all of these other factors that might be influencing that outcome. So yeah, measurement of impact is really hard, and it's really, really hard to do well. And I love what you said about that learning and that feedback, because I think that's so vital, isn't it, to anything that, you know, in many ways, whatever profession that we're in or whatever the work is that we're doing, that there is this kind of wanting to continuously learn and grow and improve and shift. And yeah, I do that a lot in my coaching practice as well. Like I think that's why we often do have supervisors, because we can go in and say, you know, I'm kind of, at the moment I'm really reflecting on like how I do chemistry session. I hate the word chemistry, but essentially those introductory sessions with clients, because I kind of had a way of doing them before, and that worked up to a point, but now the context that I'm working in is shifting. And yeah, so you're always continuously reflecting and evaluating like one's own practice in relation to, I guess, context and how context is changing, but also in terms of like the impact, like the more immediate impact anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My aim, because as you know, I'm quite sort of ambitious, but my aim is for that early years project to like actually have like a scientific evaluation for it, maybe like in its second iteration. But yeah, it's like a continual process, I think,
Definitely.
of learning and evolving.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you a question about how you stay connected to like the political or like the communal potential of your work? Like, I mean, I've got some, just wondered what.
Say more about that. Could you ask that in a bit more of a specific way?
Well, I was just thinking, would it help if I just shared some thoughts I had about like how I do it with my practice?
Yeah.
I guess just how, I guess it's just stuff that we've talked about like well, I think with me, like the personal is political. So like I was like a working class like queer child, you know, growing up as like a working class queer child in a market town outside of London. I feel like that shows up in what I do. I also think being sort of neurodiverse, I've sort of been locked out of like a lot of spaces, and so not literally, but like metaphorically, by not being able to necessarily like understand things or have things clearly and safely explained to me. So on just like a really like practical level, I'm always just really obsessed with like making spaces as inclusive and welcoming as they can be, whether that's a really warm welcome when someone comes through the door, or just kind of like unpacking things with a bit more explanation than than beyond like perhaps maybe like what the leaflet is, or perhaps what the opening kind of speech is. I might kind of go up and kind of like just do a bit more unpacking with people. So I guess that's how like the political like shows up in like what I do. It's just just kind of making spaces as welcoming as they can be.
I think there's something around I'm completely with you, the personal is political, and I think earlier on in my career I tried to keep them quite separate. Actually, I found it really difficult to bring the political kind of into the work that I was doing. And I think since I'm trying to calculate, maybe the last 9-10 years, the last decade, I think that's really shifted. And obviously it depends on the context that I'm working in, but I think like now a lot of the work that I do is very much, like I say, in the kind of justice, equity, inclusion space. And so within that context, we're able to actually name, think like the geopolitical situation in the world and how that's impacting on us, or the shifts in the economy since Brexit and since COVID, and since all the things that have happened in the UK especially, but also how things that are happening in the rest of the world is impacting the economy in the UK. And I think that a lot of the ways that I think that I do this is actually by like how I want to live the values that I bring, if that makes sense. So like being really conscious of, like what you said, like how I'm showing up in spaces, like that even in my coaching, right, that there is space for people to bring this into the coaching space, that I'm working to like shift the ways that people think more broadly as well. So even within the broader psychology profession, what are we doing as a profession to start to address the inequalities, to start to address the elitism within the profession, to look at social mobility, to also look at diversity and inclusion? And up until a few years ago, I mean, we still are very much a white middle class profession. So and then there's like smaller things. So for example, that panel that I talked about earlier on this year, like there was an invitation from one of the panelists. Her name's Yasmin, and she's got just a shout out, she's got an amazing company called Amphi Botanicals, and her drinks are just really nutritious and really delicious, I would say. But she was like, can we do this differently? We ended up calling the panel The Power in the Collective. And I was like, I want us to be sitting in a circle, and I want us to like actually address the power dynamics that we normally see when you have a panel who are all knowledgeable and everyone else who's come to learn from them. Well, actually, every single person in the room has got knowledge and wisdom that we can learn with and from and together. And so there was something about how do we create the space that can kind of shift these power dynamics in a panel conversation. So, and how do we invite everybody into the conversation? And so I think it's like, even in these kind of micro ways, really thinking about, well, how is power showing up in the space, and what can we do to shift this? Like, is it possible to shift this? And if so, how?
Love that.
So yeah, just some of those things.
Love that.
But I have a question for you, slightly tax. Or I think you're probably going to come to it as well anyway.
Yeah.
But like I was saying earlier, like it's really hard sometimes to get a sense of like, what is it that as a coach I'm bringing that really has an impact on clients? And so I'd love to hear a little bit about, like, from you in terms of like, how did you experience coaching with me? And what was it like for you, I guess? Like, and also when I guess when we had that first connection, because I definitely felt like that first connection, so much energy, and I was like, oh, I really hope he wants to work with me. There was a real kind of, I really want to work with you. But yeah, I'm just curious about, I don't know if that makes sense as a question.
Yeah,
But
no, it's great. There was like, well, like from the get-go, there was just such a good like rapport between us, and I remember thinking, I just thought, that there could be lots of like fun to be had in the sessions, and like playing around with like possibility was something that was I could just deduce in that very first encounter. Um, and then I think quite early on, I think it was maybe even after that introductory session, I was then set the task of doing 360-degree feedback, but it could be with anyone in my life. So it could be maybe one or two work colleagues, but it could be with anyone. I think it was you suggested 10 people, and I set about reaching out to 10 different people from all different sort of facets of my life, both personally and professionally. And I mean, that was like nothing short of profound, that experience. I remember just it being like a bodily experience. I just remember feeling it experiencing it in a bodily way. Just, oh gosh, I don't want to start crying again, but just like so I'm thinking aloud, and I'm just actually thinking for the first time about it, having had a bit of perspective, but being seen like that was very very powerful, and I remember I remember a friend of mine saying that it was an ingenious strategy, because the only kind of like the way to kind of like move forward is in the collective, is in the collective, is by, it's not a solo pursuit, it's like a kind of collective thing, whether it's the work that you and I did, or whether it or kind of that 360-degree feedback. But I remember in our session when I kind of came to you with it, I think I cried for like 50% of the time. I just couldn't. I just experienced a lot, and I just really remember and value just how safe you made me feel to have those emotions. Because a lot came up for me, I think, around being seen, around being like valued, around the sort of generosity of other people who kind of invested in that process by writing lots of people wrote quite a lot, and so it was really profound, and I think that set me on a course of like courage and questioning. And there were sessions where like it hurt, like it was like growing pains in the sessions. Back to your point about things maybe feeling crunchy, and then actually a person coming back and going, that was really valuable. But like there were growing pains in the sessions, and but I think that's because I was sort of moving forward in like how I viewed myself as a leader, how I viewed myself within my industry, and how I sort of like would show up for myself. And these were all new feelings and experiences, and I just always remember you just really just making me feel safe to express those things and to sort of show up. Like I feel like you're doing it now just as just a very calm, you just have a very calming like neutrality that makes me feel safe, but then also like a sense of fun as well. Like so yeah, and it's so interesting because do you remember there was like a session towards the end of our time together? Because I think we met for like 18 months or so, wasn't it? It was a long.
We had. I know we had about 11 or 12 sessions together.
Yeah.
And I don't remember it was over. I thought it was like over a year, but maybe it was longer than a year.
Maybe it was maybe a year. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it was like 15 months or something.
Yeah. It was like And I think I was just. Do you remember there was like one? I think it was like the penultimate one, and I just got like a bit. I was just bringing quite a bit of frustration because I felt quite sort of like kind of like stuck.
Yeah, I'll come back to that session in a moment, but I just want to reflect back on what you just shared about the
because there's a lot. I know that I've just like put a lot. Yeah. Like I know I just want to know what I want to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So that 360 is very different to the usual 360s that people send out.
Yeah, because in an office it's just you might just write a couple of sentences and it's not, and it's
But the questions, I've actually been curating them for about 15 years, so since I first started coaching. And I've kind of added to them and shifted them and changed them and kind of landed on the ones that you used. And these set of questions are really asking people to give you feedback around your strengths. And I think so often when we receive feedback, the feedback is around where we need to grow, where we need to develop, etc. And we don't tend to often give people space to tell us like the best of ourselves that we experience. And Zest Psychology, so Dr. Anna Kane, who heads up this organisation, she's developed an amazing model on embodied, authentic confidence. And one of the parts of that is actually on receiving affirming feedback. And so part of this is about how do we give ourselves opportunities, or how do I give my clients opportunities to start the coaching process with receiving affirming feedback? Because like you said, like that kind of set a trajectory for the coaching in the sense of it to be witnessed in that way. And I know that you had like lots of emotions around that, but it is so rare actually in life that we have the opportunity to witness each other in our strengths, in what we love about each other, in what we appreciate about each other. And I love what you said about it being collective, that we need that. Like we need, and especially in this virtual world, like I know that your work is, you still do quite well a lot in person because of the work that you do. But for me, a lot of my work, and for a lot of people that my clients, a lot of our work is behind screens now. So we're not getting that kind of physical embodied connection and that kind of feedback that we don't, the kind of feedback where you don't need words because you just feel it. So I love that. And then I'm really curious about what it is that enables clients to feel safe, because I think that I often have clients who show emotion very early on in sessions, and I'm like, what do I do that gives space? And I think you've like named one of those things. It's that kind of listening stance that I take, and like you say, it's very still. And hopefully not distracting, so that you can just be in your own world, and kind of, so you're like in your own world just expressing things that are kind of being held by the person listening. And one of the things that's helped me develop this level of listening is a practice called insight dialogue, which again I've been doing for over a decade, and it's also called interpersonal mindfulness. But it's essentially a really specific way it's a meditative practice, and it's a really specific way of like being alongside someone else as they're processing their stuff. And they always do this, they always use their hands to kind of explain what it is. But like if somebody is kind of in this space, the other person, this is what happens with friends, right? We can come in the space as well and we'll both be doing this. But actually, if someone is kind of processing their stuff, and if we're able to stay in this kind of in this zone, whatever this zone is, that over time that person is going to be able to, like, we hold a space that the other person can then come to. And in that space, there's then clarity. We can see things, we can name things. We've got the space to then, we're being nurtured in a way that we can then delve deeper into our feelings and emotions. Because there's somebody kind of co-regulating with us and supporting us through that. We're not having to be there alone with it. And I think that's so important. Like, I can't remember who the quote is, but instead of survival of the fittest, it's survival of the nurtured. And I think that's so important for me in coaching, that my clients, and I'd be really curious as to if you experience this, but my clients really feel that I am in their corner, like I am with them, alongside them, in their corner, but also really giving them the space to kind of go into those deeper parts, to then be able to kind of come, and like you say, it can be a really painful process, but hopefully at the end of it, we're able to come to some, there's that growth, and we're able to achieve in the external world what it is that we want to achieve. And I remember that penultimate session so clearly, because for a couple of sessions I was like, are we ready to end? He still seems to want sessions, not sure, like, I know we haven't quite got to where you wanted to get to, but I was like, and then you came into that session, and I think we were talking about, do we want to, like, is this going to be our last session?
Yeah.
One session, etc. And then you just gave this like one liner, and you said it really flippantly, and I was like, oh my goodness, can you not see what I can see? And so I kind of wasn't a purist coach in that moment, because I think that if I just did the coaching, I think you would have been like, well, I still don't know what to do. And so I think I was really directive, which is unlike a coach to be. I think I moved much more into mentorship. And I was like, you have to, like, do this, do that. Like, this is a real opportunity.
But I'm so glad you did, because it changed my whole direction.
I get goosebumps.
I'm so glad you did.
Wasn't it? Well,
yes. Like, it's changed everything. Sorry, I interrupted you. I just got excited. It changed my whole trajectory.
Yeah. Like, it changed your whole career trajectory, didn't it?
Yeah.
That session. And I think I'm so glad that you said it, because I keep thinking, like, what would have happened if you hadn't have, even though you said it like really, like it wasn't even a thing, like you just kind of, but I was like, gosh, I'm so glad you said that, because it really opened up something quite significant, didn't it?
You were like able to perceive and like have this like zoomed out approach and kind of understand, essentially something that I should pursue, and then you and then it was just through you kind of distilling it that I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. And obviously I had like loads of feelings about it, and then you kind of went into kind of coaching mode again about kind of like those feelings will come up. But I'm so glad you did. I like owe a like huge amount to you for like just giving me that provocation.
I think I just have got so much joy, because I think one of the things that it comes from Buddhism. It's one of the Brahma Viharas, and it's called sympathetic joy or empathetic joy, but it's where we have joy in other people's joy. And I just remember that moment so clearly, and then it ended up being a penultimate session, because things unfolded. But I just want to really say that I could have offered that provocation to a number of clients, but and then the same outcome may not have happened. But you had such an openness and such a willingness to somehow create space for those feelings to be there and still take the action. And you actually did that, like, from the beginning of our coaching. There was something around your capacity as well to really hold the tough stuff and somehow step into the action anyway, because everything you did then between that session and the next one, like, you did it, like you took the action, and that's what that's what ultimately enabled you to, like you say, changed your trajectory. So there's something about really honouring like what everything you did in that year that we were working together as well.
Oh, thank you. Well, you helped. Like you really helped me act courageously throughout the whole time. So just this chat now is just so. It's just like so. I just feel full up with ideas and nourishment and like gratitude.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Me too. I came into the conversation actually really nervous, but it's been so joyful. It's been a really joyful dialogue. Thank you so much for being up for the conversation.
And just thank you for everything you've done for me, Tas, and like you've really changed my life, and I'm really grateful for just all the work we did together and like the continued connection. I'm really grateful. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you too. Yeah, thank you. And I'm excited it's not with all coaching clients that we have this kind of like our rapport was really from day one, wasn't it? Like that connection, and and there's a conversation here around like boundaries, and different coaches will have different views, but I'm really looking forward to our kind of continued like connection. And I love the work that you do. It just feels so generative. Like there's something about the work that you do that is so generative and so impactful. Really looking forward to continuing to see kind of where it goes. And I'd love to have like a repeat in like 15-20 years time, and I see like where the work that you're doing now has kind of come to, and whether you have been able to sense whether there's been 15-20 years is a long time, it was a short amount of time but a long time at the same time, and just to see like how things have evolved, and it'd be exciting to kind of see whether you have been able to figure out like how to see that impact over a period of time. But intuitively I think we also sometimes don't even need that. Like sometimes I think we get so caught up in measurement, but I think intuitively we know.
That would be lovely. Let's set the date now.
Yes, let's. Oh, Daniel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.